Isn't faith film getting big enough that we could help each other out? There's no shortage of Christian projects and there's no shortage of Christian talent. How come there's no place to connect the two? So that is actually where it was started, is in, right in the middle of impossible. I feel like God's always asking me to do impossible.
This is the Faith and Family Filmmakers Podcast, helping filmmakers who share a Christian worldview stay in touch, informed, and inspired. Quiet on set. Rolling. Today's host is Jaclyn Witt.
Welcome back to the Faith and Family Filmmakers Podcast. My name is Jaclyn, and today I've got Laura May with me. And in our previous interview, we briefly touched on the Room4 app, but we didn't really get into all of what it means. And I would like to talk about that today. And let's just start with, what was the heart behind what got it started?
Sure. So I remember being up in Connecticut. It was the second time I had been asked to cast a project. And I did not realize, that these David and Goliath things you look back on, things that you tackled early on in the industry that you were like, oh, right now, if somebody asked me to do that, I would never. I would say, nope, that is impossible. But when we're young and we're green.
You don't know any better.
No, you don't. And so I had helped cast with a project in the Pennsylvania area, but I lived in Maryland. And I thought, well, that's fine. That's no problem. I can get a bunch of people there, a bunch of families for a sports scene one afternoon, just fill the stands and the bleachers. So then they're like, Laura, you did a great job. Could you help us cast for this courtroom scene? It's the most pivotal scene in the movie. Again, I knew no better. It's the most pivotal scene in the movie. And we need a courtroom packed with people. And we are going to need people there for 8 days filming. But here's the thing. We cannot pay for their travel and we cannot pay for their lodging, but we need them for all 8 days. And I was like, oh, sure, no problem.
No problem.
And if anyone asked me to do that now, I would say, go back into your prayer closet and ask the Lord for wisdom. Okay, because that is not wisdom. But I didn't know any better. And so the Lord took that innocence and that naivety and he blessed the socks off of it, because I was reaching out to people. Luckily, there were a couple of big names in that scene. So I was like reaching out with tentacles everywhere going, hey, do you want to be in a film? You're going to be in a scene with this person and this person and this person who were pretty hot in the Christian film world at that time. And I literally had the whole courtroom full of people. Thank God. Like, that was completely him. I just got to be, I was the cord, but he was the plug, he was the outlet, he was the everything. And so as we're there, I was thinking, man, it would have been great if we could have had an avenue to just blast this thing out on, And it was funny because we even had a guy fly from Denmark. I kid you not. He later got it published in the paper and he sent us a copy, and it was, I think that's Dutch that they speak over there. I don't remember. We couldn't understand a word of the article, but here's a picture of this man from Denmark in his suit in the courtroom. And like all of Denmark was rejoicing that he flew to America to be in a movie. And it was so
oh my goodness.
Cool. And so he came over. He literally flew over, paid for his hotel for the 8 days. It was wild. And so anyway, so many cool things were birthed in that moment. I was talking with a bunch of the extras. Of course, we had hours and hours that we weren't filming and we were all just stuck in this little room together. And we were like, man, why isn't there something, like Actors Access, but for Christians? Why isn't there something just for faith-based and family-friendly projects? Because that would be so much easier. We weed through things. We spend hours and hours and hours on Actors Access or Backstage.com or CastingNetworks.com. And even back then, people were on Mandy.com. And it was just all these websites. But you had to filter through so many projects that you didn't even know. You couldn't even tell from the breakdown whether or not they would align with your faith. Like maybe it looks like it is for that scene, but maybe not for the rest of the movie. And so we got talking about, why isn't there a website for just that? Isn't faith film getting big enough that we could help each other out? There's no shortage of Christian projects and there's no shortage of Christian talent. How come there's no place to connect the two? And so that is actually where it was started, is in, right in the middle of impossible. I feel like God's always asking me to do impossible. And shortly after that, I went to a film festival called the Hollywood Divine Film Festival. Oh, I love it. It was tiny, but it was so mighty. And I keep hoping that they'll come back again for another round. And the Lord told me, you need to go watch the George Mueller, or some people say it Mueller, the George Mueller story. And it was a cartoon. It was just an animated thing. And the Lord's like, get over there, get over there, get over there. Well, of course, back in that time, like Dallas Jenkins was there. He was just starting with The Chosen. It was years ago. And so I'm like, Lord, I have to go teach a session. But the Lord's like, get in there. I kid you not. I walked in there. Nobody else was in this huge auditorium. Nobody else was in there to watch that cartoon. But here's me, just walking in because the Lord told me to go watch this cartoon. And of course, it was at that scene where he's running this orphanage and he's so believing for the Lord to provide that he sets the children down with no food and with no beverage. And he says, children, we're going to thank the Lord because he will provide. He has never failed us before and he will never fail us now. And so he sits the children down to an empty table to pray and to thank the Lord. And then he gets a knock on the door and somebody says, hey, the Lord woke me up at 3 a.m. to bake bread for you. I hope that I heard him right, but I've got all this bread and I've been baking all night. Is this something you could use? And of course he's like, oh, praise the Lord. And then a milk truck breaks down or not a truck, but like a wagon.
Yeah.
And so then knock on the door. Hey, we have all of this milk and it's going to spoil before we're able to get the carriage fixed. Could you guys use some milk? And so, of course, it was at that scene and I'm weeping, watching this cartoon in this huge church auditorium all by myself. And I'm going, Lord, I hear you. Lord, I hear you. It's going to be big and it's going to be scary and I'm not going to know, but you are going to require me to have the faith to sit down and thank you for the things that I can't even see and to say thank you in the presence of other people, knowing that I will either look like an absolute lunatic or that faith that I'm going to put out there is going to somehow reveal your glory. And just over and over and over, he kept saying, are you ready? Are you ready? Are you willing to walk this road? And of course, I'm like, the George Mueller story has always been so fascinating and so encouraging. I talked about missionaries in the last episode and kind of my addiction to like a great missionary story. I love it. So it really felt like the Lord was like, I'm going to have you walk this sort of path. And so I'm wiping the tears away. I'm looking at the clock, like, oh, I got to run and go teach my own seminar at the festival. And literally the whole thing has been just like that ever since then. It's just been these really big sort of impossible things. And it sits there long enough that I know that there are people who are going to say, well, she's crazy or she's never going to finish. Or it's not going to happen. And I just have to believe. And I'm actually grateful that you asked about the heart because I had forgotten until, now I hadn't thought about that recently, how the Lord was like, I need this from you. I need this faith from you. And so the heart behind it was, let's start something and connect people to be the networker. I feel like the body, here's another ism of mine, I guess, is the body of Christ should be unstoppable. But right now we're so disjointed that it's like the knuckle is doing a great job over there. And like the ankle is doing fine and the pinky's over here, but I feel like we are so disembodied from one another that the support structure that we should have in place that's in, I think it's Acts 4, where the body of Christ lacked nothing, the early church, because they shared what they had. That has been driven into my soul as one of the stakes that is going to pin down Room 4, that we will lack nothing when we actually share what we have. When we take our resources and we go, hey, I've got this and I know you don't have this, so let's do some old-fashioned barter and let's make it happen. But right now, not everybody, but it's safe to say most folks within the industry are sort of floundering. There's a couple of groups that are like rocking it and they have all the funding they need. And then there's 95% of us who are like scraping, trying to go, but if we just had the funding, we'd be okay, but I think that there's a lot more barter that we could do. There's a lot more hand in hand, like the left hand helping the right hand. And so in that, little did I know that even faith-based casting was being birthed in Beverly Holloway. She's, of course, one of our favorite casting directors. God was birthing in her something very similar that he was to me all those years ago. And as I was in that room saying, we need to do something, she had actually met with Brian Jagger, who is the head of Casting Calls America. And she met him at a film festival and said, could you create a faith-based section, like a little wing just for my kind of projects over there? And he's like, yeah, we could do that. We already have the software. We'll just splinter off a little piece. And so then as Christian casting is growing, so is faith-based casting. And I had been building a community and they had been building software. And all of a sudden, Bev Holloway goes to them and goes, you need to go talk to Laura about what she's doing, okay? Because we have the thing, but she has the people, and we need to somehow work together because the thing and the people need to work in tandem. And so it was neat because God had been preparing my heart for this connective tissue building structure. So we have worked side by side with faith-based casting. And the difference between Room 4 and faith-based casting is we want to kind of be like the housing for like the shopping mall, right? So we want to let you know what's on faith-based casting. We also want to tell you about the faith-based projects on Actors Access. We want to tell you if we found a great casting on Facebook or if there's one hidden Instagram. Like we want to be kind of that holding space where you can find them from all over in one place, the funnel, so to speak.
Yeah.
But but never at the expense of, never in competition with one another. Like, just how can we build up each other? And here's my last one. This is the last one people know me for, is I constantly say a rising tide lifts all ships. And so that is my goal. Like, hey, y'all, let's just work on getting the water in here, and then we all rise together. So sorry, that was a really
Absolutely.
long answer, but
No, it's fantastic. And I love, like, what I've learned in my walk with God is that I think sometimes he specifically chooses us when we are naive because we don't know
yes.
any better. Like I think I was 19 and I decided, hey, I want to learn Spanish. And so I bought a Spanish English dictionary and I thought, how hard could it be? And I just started practicing the language because I knew
Uh,
people that were struggling with English and they were from a Spanish speaking country. And so I made friends with them. And so I went through like 2 years of just learning this language. I didn't even necessarily have plans to go visit anywhere that speaks Spanish. Now I live in Mexico, and it's because in order for us to have Faith and Family Filmmakers Association, like, we have to be somewhere where we can afford to live because it's not cheap to start a business, right? And so we sold everything. We left everything in Canada. We came to Mexico, lived off of our own savings so that we could build everything for exactly the same heart that you're talking about, is like, we are going to be stronger when we work together. Like in Acts, right? Where everybody pooled resources together and then nobody lacked anything. And so I know that the more that people step into what we're creating because God has placed it on us, and like, honestly, same for me. Who in the world am I
yeah.
to be, like, you've been around since we started out with the Family Friendly Screenwriting Academy,
Yes.
where it was just about screenwriting. And I thought, okay, yeah, that'll be my part-time thing where I'll teach screenwriting and then I'll just be a writer. I thought I was just going to participate. It didn't occur to me or to Jeff that we would end up facilitating something that would potentially support the entire industry. But
Right.
yet here we are, where God has connected us with opportunities to learn skills and business and all of these things. And I mean, Jeff wasn't a website developer, and it's like now he's doing all these things, and we never
Yeah.
it was just never part of our thoughts. But then we were like, well, I guess we have to do this now. And we didn't have time to stop and think, but that's crazy.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of the juggling, is somebody throws you another ball, you're like, okay,
Yep.
let me get to that one in a second, but you don't have time to reason. That ball should not be anywhere
Right.
near me. You're just like, all right, got it. Okay, I'll do it. I'll try to figure it out. And this journey has been so much like that for me too. And in fact, I'm just going to brag a little bit. Okay, I got to be in your beta class. I love
Yeah.
that. You're like, well, I'm not sure how this is going to go, but and I still adore the time that I had in that class. And I love seeing where God has brought you guys, because I think, I tell people too, last episode, I talked about how our passion defines our ministry, and well, it doesn't even define our ministry, just the people that we'll touch.
Content Christian Media Conference is hosting a one-day event on Monday, February 24th at Prestonwood Baptist Church in Plano, Texas. It's one amazing day of fellowship, networking, screenings, panels, and inspirational keynotes. There'll be breakouts on filmmaking, storytelling, writing, distribution, and more, with lunch included. It's perfectly timed, just before the start of NRB. Register at ChristianMediaConference.com. You can find the link in the show notes. Register now and get early bird pricing until December 31st. Join us for Content One Day Christian Media Summit, Monday, February 24th, for filmmakers, actors, screenwriters, podcasters, authors, distributors, and you.
Register at ChristianMediaConference.com.
The crazy thing is, I thought when I was young, I wanted to be a singer, and I thought I was pursuing singing, and then I go to school for music, and then I even go do this talent competition for singing, but they couldn't. They're like, no one-trick ponies. You have to act too, and you have to be a lifestyle model. And I was like, what? No. But they're like, no, they need everyday looking people. I was like, oh, okay, well, then I can do that, because I'm definitely an everyday looking person. So
Right.
and they're like, well, can you act? And I said, well, man, I was standing on a chair behind the pulpit singing when I was 4 years old at church. And then quickly after that, as quick as I could memorize lines, I was always doing the plays and the skits. And I love drama, got to high school, did college drama, loved it. But I was like, as a grown up, I can still act? What? Like, it was so outside the sphere of my little bitty Baptist upbringing that I just thought you get married and then you have kids and you just have to put all the fun stuff away.
Right. You only have fun when you're a kid. I feel like that's the reverse. I am having so much fun as an
Oh, yeah.
adult.
So
I
much.
love it.
Like, literally, so much of my childhood is kind of this blur because I feel like nothing that exciting happened. No offense to my parents, they gave me a very stable home, but it's not thrilling in the least. So I have gone on the opposite spectrum and gone, I will give my children fantastic memories and experiences that they will never forget. And sometimes I go a little overboard. My husband's like, I think you're overcompensating. And I was like, that's okay because I told the Lord, if I do this, I'll do it with my children. I promise it'll never come before them. You allowed me to walk into this as a mother. I will do it with my children. And it's funny because that childhood dream of singing, and then they made me do acting in this competition. Well, I didn't get much attention for singing. I got a little bit for singing and songwriting, but I actually got an award for my acting, like top 10 out of
Oh.
thousands of people. And I went, oh, that was really unexpected and kind of cool. And so shortly after that, I end up in a Walmart commercial and I was like, what? I can do this as a grown up. And so I tell people just because you have a dream, don't think that that particular dream is going to be the highway that you ride for the rest of your life. It is more
Right.
likely the highway that's going to take you to the exit you need. So God got me on that music highway knowing he would not keep me there, knowing it had nothing to do with the end goal, but it had everything to do with putting me in position to have me exit at this crazy film exit where I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I was silly and naive enough to go ahead and say yes
Mhm.
because it was fun and I enjoyed it
Yes.
and it brought me life. And one of my favorite quotes, and I don't remember who says it, but he says, find what it is that makes you alive and go do that. Because what the world needs is more people who have come fully alive. And
Yeah.
I know for you too, Jaclyn, like when we see each other at film festivals, it's like that atmosphere, those people, it gives me such life. And I'm exhausted,
Mhm.
but exhilarated at
Mhm.
the same time. Like
Oh,
my
yeah.
body's worn out, but my
Yeah.
heart and soul are so full.
Yeah, and I feel so grounded,
Yes.
like, everybody there's most of them anyways are brand new to me,
Hmm.
but I feel like these are my people. These are like,
Yes.
I get them, they get me, and like a family reunion, and actually, my mom said something to me recently where she was saying, "What we need to do as believers is to come together setting differences aside in order to bring glory to God," and she gave the example of, like, my siblings and I, we don't always get along. We're just very different people. And it's not to say that we have discord or anything. It's just we have different ideas and
Hmm.
because different personalities and different experiences in life. So we're just very different people. We do, though, get together and work together and figure it out so that we can celebrate our parents on their birthdays or for whatever
Hmm.
thing that we've decided to gather for in order to honor them. And we figure it out. We make it happen. We
Yeah.
set our differences aside because the goal is to honor our parents, and
Yep.
we can all agree on that goal. And I feel like in the film industry, we need to do the same thing because the end goal, what we want to do is glorify our Father. We want to honor him.
Hmm.
And so, whatever differences we have, we can set them aside because we have a common goal. And we
Hmm.
can work together to figure out how do we meet that common goal.
Right. Yeah. It's so important because so much of this industry in the world is so competition based. It's ridiculous. And I feel like too many times we look to Hollywood and we put too much glory in how they do things. Well, if our movies could look like Hollywood. Now, should they be excellent? Yes, they should. But
Absolutely.
should that mean that there is one monster company funding all of our stuff? No, I don't think that our road to get there should look the same. I think that our end goal should be one of excellence. And I do think that our stuff ought to be better than theirs because
I
we
agree.
serve a creative God. He
Yes.
is the author of creativity. And if we are walking in fellowship with him and we are inspired and, have the Holy Spirit indwelling in us, then our stuff should be better. Period.
Absolutely. And
But
that's exactly how I feel too. Like our stories should be the most compelling.
yes,
Our products should be the most excellent. The reality
yeah,
is that it really should be the cream of the crop.
yes.
Like that's what we should be pursuing. None of this good enough.
Doesn't it feel sometimes though like people are like, okay, but we have to do it just like Hollywood? And I'm like, no, 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 no. Have you read the
No.
Old Testament? Do you know how the walls of Jericho fell? Okay, it was very creative. It was very eloquent. It was very allegorical. Okay, right? We're gonna march around the city and then we're gonna march and march and march for 7 days. We're gonna holler, we're gonna break some jugs, and
Mhm.
then boom, the walls are gonna fall. Like we forget. We forget that Gideon and his 300 men defeated the armies. We forget that it was David and Goliath. And all over scripture, the Lord is like, I do things different on purpose so
Yeah,
that you know it was me. And here we're all like,
exactly.
but we have to do it like, no, we do not have to do it like
No,
Hollywood. And
I
that's,
think he is ready to just break that, like where he's basically saying, look, you guys had your fun doing it the human worldly way. I'm going to
yes,
show you how to do it my way. And it's going to be better than anybody could have ever expected.
yes, I pray so. With the Room4 app, I'm like, okay, so Actors Access is big. It's big. I get it. But I feel like we can do what Actors Access does. And by the way, I kind of want to do everything else. When I was talking to the app development team and I was explaining all the things that I want Room4 to be able to do, the guy set his pencil down on the table and he looked at me and he said, "You want to build an entire online world, don't you?"
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Yes, I do." Because
Why? Is that hard?
I know. What I mean, how much could that possibly cost me?
Right.
It turns out a
How
lot.
hard could it be? Right? Yeah,
But
exactly.
I look at We Audition, right? So that's a website or an app that a lot of people use to find readers. Well, that's great, but why can't we have a section of Room4 where you can find a faith-based person to work with? Why wouldn't we want to support each other? Again,
And
the
make the
body of
connection.
Christ uniting. Yes, find a new film friend. I want to have a social media aspect on there. I want to have a tab where you can look at everybody who's fundraising because I'm thinking, listen, right now there's so much noise on social media and it's like, well, I've got to GoFundMe. Well, I've got to Give, Send, Go. Well, I've got an Indiegogo. Well, I've got a Kickstarter. And they're just hoping that some rich person will stumble upon it on social media and give a bunch of money, or that grassroots efforts will blow them away. And let's be real, most of the time it doesn't seem to happen. And so I've said, look, rising tide. Okay, I want to have a tab on the app where you can just click currently fundraising. And then
Mhm.
everybody, I don't care if there's 3,000,002 people who all want to post their fundraisers, then we at least have them all in one place. Doesn't that make
Yeah.
sense? If you need a reader, can't you go to one place? If you need a good script, hello, Jaclyn. If you all listen to this podcast and you have not read some of her scripts, whoa. Okay, like every single one I've ever read, I'm laughing, I'm weeping, like I'm trembling, all the things, every single script of yours I've ever seen. So I want to have a script library where people can pull scenes because people are like going, we can't find good scenes without profanity or
Yes.
without sexual suggestions or without potty content. And so another thing, it kind of sounds like I'm trying to answer all of the film world's problems. I am. Listen, I have 9 kids. I'm afraid of nothing. Okay. So I try to see how many problems we have. And if it's 812, I don't care. Just give me a minute. We'll get to all 812.
Right.
We'll do our best.
You are a problem solver at heart.
Yeah. Even scripts, like I need a monologue or I need a scene to do with a
Yes.
partner. I need a reel. Okay, great. Go to our monologue or go to our script library. It's all clean scripts. And by the way, you might kind of love some of these script writers. And then you find out, oh, they have screenwriting academies and they have all these things. But it's just constantly connecting so that we're building this framework that is just solid as concrete. And then we all build from there. There's a lot of other things I want the app to do, but I'm rambling at this point. Just like get so stinking excited.
Yeah. It's hard not to when you're excited about what you're doing, especially when you can start to see how it's coming together. I know I do the same thing when I kind of get on my soapbox where I can see what God's doing, where now the vision is becoming clearer and I can just be like, oh, it's going to be amazing.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And I'll tell you what. So I'm going to go somewhere. I don't know if I should go here or not, but I'm going to. There was a gal in that screenwriting class with me, your very first screenwriting class. And so we as a family, I'm just going to put it out there. I was in my 40s when all of a sudden somebody told me that Leviticus 23 was for me too. And I was like, wait, what? What? I don't even, what are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about. And then I was like, I just read it and I am not feeling inspired or encouraged. I'm like, it's Leviticus. I mean, what are we supposed like, come on.
Yeah.
Numbers,
You read it and you're like, and?
we don't ever go to like numbers for inspiration and, holy living, right? And so I remember there was a gal who was doing a Sukkot film. She wanted to write a Sukkot film. And I got so excited because—
By the way, for those who don't know the word Sukkot, it's the Hebrew word for the Feast of Tabernacles. Carry on.
Yes. Okay. Good call. Good call on that explanation. But as a family, it's funny because somebody very close to me was like, I guess there's nothing wrong with you celebrating. I think it's kind of weird that you do that, but I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with it. And I'm like, no. No, there's not.
Wait, what? Obeying? No, there's nothing wrong with that.
I know. Oh, yeah, don't even get me started. Boy, you and I could soapbox on that for a long time. But
Yeah.
anyway, what I loved is that, like you said before, like we set aside the things that make us different, right? And we cling to the things that all make us the same. Like we all are longing to please Abba, Father, to hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant. And when we drop the lines and we drop the even the denominational boundaries, right? We go to a film festival and I don't know what denomination each person associates
Yeah,
with. And I kind of love that
it doesn't
because then
matter.
sometimes through conversation, you'll be like, oh, okay, so they're this or they're that. But you didn't know, like there was a common goal for a common good for the glory of our creator God. And I love that in dropping those lines, then sometimes you meet people who are like, oh, when that girl writes that movie, like I want my kids to see it. Because we've seen plenty of Christmas movies, but hello, I've never seen a movie about the Feast of Tabernacles. And I've never seen a movie about anything like that. Like that would be so cool. So for whatever it's worth, I love what you're doing. And I think that you know, but in case you don't, like I am watching this volcanic eruption happen out of what started so many years ago. And I remember us connecting just on, I think you had won an award, and I just wanted to celebrate with you. So I shared it to the Christian Casting community page, but I didn't even know you. And later on, I was like, oh, that's that same girl. Oh, she's kind of cool. I like her. And then all of a sudden, we just started talking more and more and more and more and more. And it's just been so cool to see this, neither one of us had any idea about each other. And then just to see it exploding out the top is so encouraging because it's such
Yeah.
an organically God thing.
Yeah, and I love that when you do develop relationships and when you have those relationships that last for years, you get to see the progress
Mhm.
that God is doing in their life and where he's leading them. And it is amazing when I went to my very first film festival, I went to Content and I met Stephanie Parker
Oh,
and
yeah.
and so it was kind of at the beginning of her journey and it was the
Neat.
very beginning of mine. And so we were both like brand new
Yeah.
and then we kind of, went our own way, doing our own thing for a while. And then we met again a few years later, and I had seen some updates of what she'd been doing, and she'd seen some updates of what I'd been doing. And so
Yeah.
we're like, it's so cool to watch your journey. Like I knew you back when.
Yes, I think the same thing. I love that we were all on the ground level. And I tell people too, when they're just starting out, I say, do not despise small beginnings and don't despise the other
Absolutely.
people. So many folks are like, oh, well, I need to prove myself. I need to make it. If I could just be in a movie with so and so, or they get their picture with a celebrity and they're like, okay, this will prove. Y'all, there is such a wonderful, beautiful, innocent brilliance about knowing the people that are on the same level as you and just building together. Like you said, with me and you and with Stephanie and I'm watching other filmmakers do it. Tyler Sansom is another one.
Mhm.
His little church, kind of like Sherwood, grassroots. They're like, we just want to make a film. And then they debuted it in the prisons because, according to Matthew, I was in prison and you visited me. I was sick and you came to me. And so they debuted it in prisons and we're having men being baptized. Like they didn't do a red carpet premiere first. They
Yeah.
sent it to the prisons first.
Oh,
And
man.
so I love watching how God has blessed First Capital and their films. And they're building their own studio. And I'm like, I remember when you guys were like, okay, so we can't pay anybody. We need some extras.
Yeah.
This is our first church movie. It's just our church family doing it
Yeah.
together. And there are some really cool things just exploding with excitement. And it's been really, really cool to see.
Hi, indie producers. Listen, I get it. I know how hard it is to make a movie make money. That is why I have teamed up with Jaclyn Witt from Faith and Family Filmmakers Association to create a 12-month program to teach you everything I've learned along the way. I'm Alexandra Boylan. I have written and produced 8 profitable films. My movies include Switch, The Greatest Inheritance, my newest film, Identity Crisis, Catching Faith, and the list goes on. All of my movies have been on Netflix, Hulu, on the shelves of Walmart, Tubi, Amazon, iTunes. Again, another list that goes on. So, set yourself up for success and sign up today at FAFFassociation.com. You can also find it in the show notes here, and we'll see you soon.
That is so exciting. Yeah, they gave their first fruits to God. And I think that when you do that, God is he is looking for opportunities to bless us. And he watches for things like that. And so, yeah, I want to encourage people. I think that this episode has really definitely dove into understanding that like God is God. His ways are above our ways. We're not necessarily going to understand the journey, but it is going to be such an adventure. And when we keep ourselves grounded in him and serving him, and that the goal is to bring him honor and glory, that whatever avenue he calls us to, we can do that. Even if it looks like he's calling us away from what we think we were supposed to do,
Right.
we need to trust him in that journey. And he's blessing us. And the more that we can bless each other, I mean, Jesus said that they will know you by the way you love one another.
Yeah.
And this is what we're doing. We are like ready to set aside our pride and be like, look, I know that I can do something for you. Whether you can actually do something for me or not is not how this works. Right? I can give to you and I'm going to do it. And God is going to figure out how that all works out in the end. And so, like I used to tell my kids, don't worry about the chores and who does what day, because you know what? By the time you both move out, you'll have done the same thing. So
Exactly.
it really doesn't matter. So,
And you know, for my children, they know now to not say, that's not fair. You can't say that in my house, because then
Yeah.
I will intentionally make things more unfair. And I tell them that if I teach you that fair is a world principle, then you are going to leave this home and be so horribly
oh,
discouraged.
yes.
And
so disappointed.
It's my job to teach you that life is not fair, but things always balance out. And so if
Yes.
this moment feels very unbalanced, your moment is coming. And I think even certainly in this industry of a million no's, okay, 100 no's for every yes.
Yeah. And feast and famine.
Yes, that it's really good to know, like, life isn't fair, but God is.
Yeah.
And we know He promises, vengeance is mine, I will repay. He promises to send rain on the just and the unjust. But He says, I am just, I am righteous, and I promise you, I see what I need to see, both the good and the bad,
Mhm.
and I will make things right.
Yeah. One of the best things that I think I focused on teaching my kids was not to complain about what they were given. The way I did that was with food, because they were very picky. And so I told them they were going to eat what I made them for dinner. And if they complained about it, I was making the same thing again the next day until they stopped complaining about it.
Brilliant.
And then I would move on to something else. And so I think that God does that sometimes, where He's like, look, you're going to complain. We're not moving forward. You need to get your attitude right, and then we can move forward.
40 years in the wilderness proves that, right?
Yep,
Because not a one
exactly.
of them got in. They waited for their children to get Canaan, because He's like, oh, you going to complain? And then I'm going to send quail, and then you're still going to complain? Even after I send water and all of the things, and miraculously lead you. And for 40 years, your clothes don't rot and your shoes don't get worn, and you are still going to complain. So my mom used to do the same thing. Well, sort of the same thing. She would say, if you don't want to eat it for dinner, that's fine. I'll put it in a baggie and it'll be there cold for you for breakfast. And so, yeah, excellent rule. And I do think that God does that to us sometimes, because I tell my kids, if you are feeling stuck in a season, let me ask you, how has your attitude been in that season? My son called me from work today. Mom, I feel like I'm never going to get out of here, and I'm trying to have a good attitude. I said, it is possible you are being tested for that very exam that's going to bump you up. So do well, son.
Yes.
Do well and stay faithful in the small things, because only then can He trust you with the larger things.
Amen. I think there we go. That's it. That's the episode. We did it.
All right.
Fantastic. Oh, this was so much fun. I love talking to you.
Love you.
Thanks for listening to the Faith and Family Filmmakers podcast. If you've been enjoying this podcast, take a moment to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast player so you don't miss an episode. And if you'd like to support the production of this podcast, you can leave a tip at faffpodcast.com/support. Bringing filmmakers together for faith and family.